everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Isaiah West. I'm the Teen Services Specialist at the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and you have joined us for Up and Out with PGCMLS. Today, we have a very special guest with us, my biased opinion entirely, but today we have Alex Chan. Alex Chan is the Mental and Behavioral Health Specialist for the University of Maryland Extension within their Family and Consumer Sciences program. He brings practical knowledge and experience in stress management, family relations, and adolescent development. Prior to taking on the specialist role, Alex worked as the 4-H Youth Development Agent for the Prince George's County office. He holds a master's and doctoral degree in Human Development and Family Studies from Auburn University. He's also a licensed marriage and family therapist in Maryland and the District of Columbia. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
My pleasure.
I guess to get us started, can you just tell us a little bit about what UMD's Mental and Behavioral Health Specialist does? Sorry, that's a tongue twister for me today.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm going to get started with a little bit of history of what Extension is in general, because maybe some people who are watching or listening don't really know what it is. Extension is actually a service of the College of Agriculture. So the office that I'm sitting in right now is actually part of the College of Agriculture from the University of Maryland. And the history of Extension actually goes back over 100 years. Back in the day, the universities like UMD and other large state universities were supposed to bring out the research on the best farming practices out into the community. Because a lot of the economy was more agricultural based 100 years plus ago. And so the universities created the Extension service in order to bring all the practices that people were developing on campus out into the communities where people were actually farming. And over the past 100 years, the program has expanded from more than just farming to include things like mental health, nutrition, finance. We have a youth development programming. We have environment and natural resources programming. So the whole goal of it is to bring the resources of the university out to the community. So my specialty as a mental health specialist, I bring programming related to mental health, educational programming out to those who need it. So that could be the general public. I just did a presentation today on stress management for the general public. It could also be professionals, so equipping professionals to navigate mental health issues better in their line of work. So all of it is based on research, and we do our homework to make sure that the information we're providing is sound, since we're representing the university in that way. But the target is the general community.
That's really awesome, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't really know that much about Extension. People have heard it, I'm sure. Like everyone has probably heard of their county extension office and the things that they do. I know that before you got this job, just a little update for everyone. Alex is actually my husband, so I get to tease him quite a bit about his answers today. But yeah, it's really nice to kind of know that that's there. I know that it was nice for me as a librarian to know that I had a great partner in Extension. But you mentioned some programming that you do, and you kind of talked about stress, but can you talk a little bit more about some of these public programs that you do?
Yeah, so I mean, over the past year, some of our most popular programs have been related to stress management. So, whether it's work-related stress and burnout, or whether it's pandemic stuff like dealing with grief, those have been some of our most popular programs. And I think people like it because we always provide like a practical takeaway. I mean, like I said, we're based in research, and we definitely bring the science aspect to it, but Extension is all about taking that research and transforming it into practical tools. So you'll always get a handout, you'll always get, some kind of activity that you can actually do after attending, even related to mental health. And so And the good thing about our programming is that, it's educational, it's not therapy, so anyone can come out, and so that's been really popular. In terms of professional development, a really popular program has also been a program I designed that teaches medical staff how to have more sensitive conversations related to mental health, because a lot of folks on the front lines in medical professions haven't necessarily gotten the training in terms of dealing with emotions and how to work that into a limited amount of time in an appointment. So those have been some of the more popular programs that we've offered over the past year.
That's awesome. I think that some of the stuff that you mentioned has been really great, but can you dive in a little bit deeper? So that as Up and Out, we really try to focus on things that organizations have that benefit and educate LGBTQ youth. Do you have any programs or initiatives that you're running right now that deal with LGBTQ youth?
So we have the Relationship Smarts program, which is something that is not just done in Maryland, but in a lot of places around the country. But this is a program that serves not just LGBTQ youth, but youth in general. But it teaches relationship skills, and so this is a topic that a lot of people don't get a lot of formal education in, and you're kind of just left up to chance. But it teaches skills related to forming healthy relationships during the teen years and what to look for, how to avoid abusive relationships. And so that's been a program that's been pretty popular among youth. And in terms of LGBT youth specifically, one of the research institutes at the university has been focused on improving the experience of mental health care for LGBT people. So that's called the Prevention Research Center, and there's a lot of great people there who are working on educating providers who work with LGBT populations in order to make sure that they're more sensitive and better equipped to serve them.
Awesome. That's a lot that you do for LGBTQ youth. I guess a good follow-up question for that is, why is this mental health education and relationship education and awareness so important for LGBTQ youth?
Well, it's important to take mental health seriously for sexual and gender minorities, because what the research shows us is that there's a higher prevalence, there's a higher rate of things like mood disorders, which would be like anxiety or depression. There's a higher rate of self-harm, suicidal behavior, and substance use among LGBT youth. And that means that we need to pay closer attention, because when you have those risk factors, it can set you up for some more challenges later in life, whether it's with jobs or staying in school or just even relationships, that those mental health issues expand beyond just the individual who's suffering.
That's it's really interesting that you mention mental health issues that are more prevalent in LGBTQ youth. Do you know, are there any ideas why LGBTQ youth experience these mental health issues greater than other youth?
Yeah, well, it's the thing about the field is that it's constantly evolving. I mean, the societal acceptance of discussing LGBTQ issues is going up, and therefore the research is also following. So we're still kind of gathering information about why, but one of the theories is that with the age of coming out being younger and younger, I think the average age of coming out in the 80s or 90s was somewhere in the person's 20s, and now it's definitely earlier in the teens for an average age of coming out. That coincides with a period of life where you are also under a lot of other pressure. So imagine coming out as an adult where you've already got a job and maybe you're somewhat established in some way. You've already got like a network. You kind of know who you are in a sense in many ways, versus coming out when you're still under a lot of peer pressure, coming out when you're still not independent financially, coming out when you're still worried about your own physical growth and body image and stuff like that. So it's the timing, if that makes sense. The fact that societal acceptance is going up actually means that this big event in a young person's life of coming out coincides with a lot of challenge that maybe isn't related to their sexual minority status.
Yeah. I mean, I always hear that, and it just makes me wonder, like, what can we do to protect these youth? Do you know what adults could do to make sure that our youth are supported? I mean, in your capacity, like dealing more with mental and behavioral health, but how can we support a youth's mental and behavioral health?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, I think as an adult, one of the things that you can do is just make sure that you're regularly checking in and listening. It sounds so basic, but it's really effective. When you are making it a habit to just check in and listen, and I mean listen in its barest definition, like you're not giving advice, you're not judging or doing anything like that. It's just you're just listening. That creates the environment where if something is going on, then your young person, whether it's a student or whether it's a child of yours, knows that they can go to you. When you are, if you're offering unsolicited advice or you're telling them what to do all the time and not giving them the chance to just tell you, then it's harder to support them in that sense. Another thing you can do is also kind of addressing stigma. So even though like related to LGBT youth, like societal acceptance is going up in certain areas, but mental health is still one of those areas that it's also going up in the ability to talk about it, but there's still a lot of stigma. So adults can help reduce that by making mental health part of what they talk about in general. And so that the young people around them know that this is the norm. Like it's normal for me to talk about mental health. And even for younger kids, so as an adult who maybe has like a toddler or a younger school age kid, if you kind of narrate what you're going through, like let's say you have a mishap at home, like you burned dinner or something and you're really frustrated, if you narrate out loud like your thought process and calming yourself down, like it's okay, I have something in the freezer, like I can pull that out and we can still have dinner tonight, that shows that like you are coping, and so that and it demonstrates that like you're not squeamish about like talking about your feelings and frustrations and getting over that. So that modeling and reducing the stigma around mental health is another really great thing that adults can do.
That's great. I know that I always try to destigmatize mental health whenever I'm in any kind of organization that's kind of teen-centered, making sure that I let teens know that they are not alone in dealing with mental health concerns, and so it's good to hear that maybe I'm doing something right for the teens.
Totally.
But what about teens trying to support each other? What advice would you give to a teen trying to support another teen?
Yeah, so that's good. I think that's where you have to also encourage them to try to change the norm here. So when teens are supporting other teens, there's the friendship factor of just being a good friend and asking questions, like if you sort of that if you see something, say something, but that pertains to like your mental health and your friend's mental health. So like if you're noticing something, just ask, that it's if they don't want to talk about it, at least they know that you cared. It's never, it's never a bad thing to just say, what's been going on lately. So just being there, listening to understand without offering advice. Like, even as a friend, you don't need to necessarily solve their problem. You just need to listen. And the fact that someone is checking in can go a long way. So a lot of people with mental health challenges, they wait a long time before seeking help. And just the fact of somebody asking them might get them to open up earlier and seek help earlier.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna start using that when we talk about mental health in our teen action group as well. That's something that we've talked about a lot recently, and they talked about all of the self-care routines that they have personally, but they did talk about how they can include other people into their self-care and try to make each other feel good. So I'm going to take what you said back to them.
Another thing came to mind too is that there can be like a backlash to sharing a lot of stuff on social media about like coping and everything. And it almost turns mental health into like a race of its own, so that like the destigmatization of mental health kind of has turned, I've heard from community members how that has kind of turned into a race of its own. And so you also want to remind everyone, like teens and adults, that like coping isn't a race. Everybody, is dealing with things at their own pace. It's good for you to ask other people how they're doing, but just because somebody else is doing all these things, showing off all their coping skills, doesn't mean that it's bad that you're not there yet. As long as you're, trying to work on it, you're moving in the right direction.
Well, I think it's also worth mentioning that like it's not a cut and dry road to maintenance or recovery or whatever it is. So coping skills that other people might have might not necessarily be the coping skills that you are looking for yourself. So, so one thing that we're working on as an organization is trying to work with the school system to kind of provide support about like GSAs and making sure that the schools feel supported with like these ideas that they have. So why are GSAs and I am so sorry, I cannot speak today at all. Why are GSAs and bullying policies so important within schools?
Yeah, well, I think that part of the advice that I would say that is like specific to supporting the mental health of sexual and gender minority youth would be the creation of those, those policies and those groups, because it helps change the norm. Like I was saying, it's one thing to give somebody information about what constitutes like better or healthier choices. It's another thing to have that be the norm. And what the human development research shows us is that changing norms is the key to influencing behavior, especially for young people, especially for adolescents. So when there is things in the community like a GSA, when there are specific statements in law, public policy related to anti-bullying and protections, that's a signal that this is the norm. Like it's abnormal to be, against these types of things. And so when, for better or for worse, that tends to be what influences people's behavior more. It's not as much that like, you're hurting somebody else's feelings, or, we should respect all people. It's like, if it's normal, it's more likely that people will do it. And so those like upper level, the policy things and the support of groups like GSAs, that shows that this is normal.
Great. Yeah, normalization and representation matter a lot more than I think people realize sometimes. I know that just providing services like the one we're providing right now, where we're just talking about LGBTQ mental health, like having that kind of normalization and destigmatization when I was an LGBTQ youth would have done loads for me. So remember that, everyone that's listening, that's the one thing you can do is just destigmatize and normalize.
Well, another way to do that too is if you know you are working with someone who, you know, has come out and they, or they at least came out to you, there is a, you know, there is a level of support that you can provide that's more specific to their journey, you know, through coming out and, you know, discovering their identity. That's different than just being a friend. You know, like there's like the way that you might support them on specific LGBT issues would be something like asking them specific questions related to, you know, the coming out process, or like helping them think through, like, who do I want to come out to next? How do I want to come out? Like, what is my process going to be with this? Getting that support is often more helpful than just like a generalized type of, you know, support. And you don't necessarily need to be an expert. Like, you don't have to, like, if you're a parent and you aren't, you know, your child comes out as gay, for example, and you're not gay, well, it's okay. Like, you can still help them think through it, even if you haven't had that experience yourself. It's more helpful to just not be alone in thinking about those very specific issues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So we've talked a lot about how other people can support youth surrounding their mental health, but how can youth support their own mental health? Like, do you have any tips for any youth that might be watching?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of things you can do to take care of yourself. And I think for young people, especially sexual and gender minority youth, that you need to find your support group. And luckily, this is the age of the internet. And for better or for worse, like, the past year has probably amplified the digital presence of a lot of like support groups and discussion groups and stuff like that, to where you hopefully can find a group, if not in person, then online, that is supportive, and where you can, you know, talk about who you are and talk about your process and what's going on for you. It's so critical to feel connected in some way to a group of people that gets you. You know, and this is not to diminish the help of the adults in your or your friends, peers in your immediate environment, but sometimes it takes branching out and finding, you know, the support group that's right for you. And I'm not even talking like therapy support group. I'm talking like just groups of people that, you know, are like-minded, you know, not necessarily therapeutic. So I mean, support group, that's a huge thing that you can do to take care of yourself. Another thing too is that, you know, since the stress of being in a minority group, whether it's a sexual minority group, you know, racial minority group, whatever, since there's stress associated with that, you want to make sure that you are taking really good care of your body. This is something that is the foundation for feeling good in general. And I think it's talked about a lot, like physical health is talked about, you know, a ton, but it's not always necessarily paired up with mental health. But it is, you know, the things that you do to take care of your physical self have mental health benefits. For example, your brain needs specific nutrients in order to function well. And if you are not eating right, then you're starving your brain. Or if you're not eating enough, you know, you're starving your brain. And so there's a piece of advice that I learned from my colleagues here who are nutrition educators that is very fitting for this group right now is eat a rainbow. Like, that is probably some of the best nutrition advice that I've heard, because it's so simple and it helps you make good choices every day. Have I eaten a bunch of colors today, or has everything I've eaten been white, you know, or yellow? because a lot of our foods seem to be those colors. But that it's good advice, and it links up to your brain functioning, which helps with your mental health, of course. But also,
so what you're saying is don't eat a bunch of potato chips and French fries, even though they taste delicious.
Yeah, I mean, you can have those foods, of course. It's fine to eat those things, but make sure you're also eating, lots of other colors and making that the bulk of your diet. So nutrition's not my expertise, but I feel confident in saying eat a rainbow, because that's what I learned from my nutrition colleagues. Which, by the way, there are also lots of programs for adults and youth related to nutrition. I can definitely vouch for the 4-H program, being big on nutrition and healthy eating and learning how to cook different foods. A colleague of mine just shared that she ran a 4-H club that was dedicated to learning the foods of Portugal. So this group spent all last summer, I believe, learning how to cook different Portuguese foods, and it all looked amazing. So if you want to learn, that's a plug for joining, a club like 4-H. I did have one other thing though, related to supporting your own mental health, and that is to celebrate your own accomplishments. So, when you do something that you're proud of, don't hesitate in sharing that, and talking about what's working for you and what you're doing that's going well. Because as you focus on that, as you focus on the things that are going well, it's easier to remember, oh yeah, I can do stuff. Even though I'm stressed out in these areas of my life, I can, I do have a lot of skills in other areas of my life, and they're worth celebrating. So that involves a personal acknowledgement, go me, I did something right, making sure to be kind to yourself in the way that you talk to yourself every day.
It's good advice. I don't do enough of that. I need to praise myself a little bit more. Although people that know me probably are laughing at me directly right now, because I am also known as the king of self-praise. So I guess this next question is probably going to be a really hard one to answer, because it probably has a lot of varying factors involved. But when is a good time for someone struggling with mental health to seek help?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different situations that would mean it's time. Like I said earlier, people wait too long anyway. So if the thought is occurring to you, just do it. So it's a therapist is never going to turn you away just to have a check-in. They might be full, they might not be able to see anyone, but they're not going to turn you away just because you wanted to have a check-in. Actually, that prevention aspect makes things a lot easier to manage. The earlier you start talking to a professional about an emerging mental health issue, the easier it will be to actually treat it and take care of it. So my first suggestion would be, just if the thought occurs to you at all, just do it. Next, though, I would say some clearer warning signs would be if you can't disengage from distressing thoughts. That's a sign that anxiety may be starting to get out of control. Most of us have anxious thoughts every day, but we're able to kind of disengage from them in some way. But if you find that the thoughts are swirling around and you're not able to disengage from them, and that it's causing you to act in ways that you find upsetting, maybe your anxious thoughts are turning into physical jitteriness, maybe it's turning into pain, maybe it's turning into even stomach issues. There's a brain-gut connection. That would be a sign. So if you're seeing that it's really difficult to disengage, and then also since a lot of times the discussion of mental health focuses on the individual, I also want to point out that like it does affect the people around you, and the way that we relate to others is part of our overall like mental and behavioral health. So if you find yourself in constant conflict with the people around you, then that would be a good time to start seeing a mental health professional as well. And maybe before you're in constant conflict. If you're noticing like a upward swing in conflict, then that would be a good time to see somebody as well. Even if it's within the family, you know, like parent-child conflicts, sibling conflicts. I think sibling conflicts tend to be brushed under the rug because it's viewed as so normal that like, oh, siblings will quarrel with each other. But if you have a really conflictual relationship with a sibling and it is causing you stress every day because you live with them, that you don't deserve to suffer like that, you know, and it doesn't deserve to be just like disregarded because it's about a sibling. Like that would to me feel like bullying in a sense. And so so even conflicts like that, you can seek help from a mental health professional. And there's people like me called, you know, family therapists who specialize in dealing with those types of issues.
Thank you for that. I also feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the more severe cases that might pop up. So if someone is in distress, what's the recommendation? I know that teens are thinking it, so I'm just going to ask it. Like, if someone is in severe distress, what should they do?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're really worried about someone's safety, like if they're expressing suicidal thoughts or if they are harming themselves actively or, you know, even talking about it, that would be the time. That would be another clear time to seek services. I think by that point, a lot of people realize, okay, it's time, you know. But by that point, it's escalated to where you really don't have another choice. Like if you're at that level of fearing for somebody's safety, then you must, you know, get in touch with, if you're a teen watching, you must get in touch with an adult who can help you. If you're an adult watching and there's somebody, you know, who's actively suicidal or harming themselves, either or, you know, making sure that you can stay with them until you get them some immediate assistance, because at that level the person's safety is in danger and you don't want to let that go. So that would be calling a crisis line. You know, there's things like the National Suicide Hotline here in Maryland. There's also 211. Press 1 for the crisis hotline. There are also mobile crisis teams in a lot of counties. Prince George's may still be working on theirs, but if you happen to be tuning in from another county, there are mobile crisis teams where like if you call 911, they can send out a mental health professional. So this is safety, and you don't want to be the weakest link in the chain. If you're realizing that someone's in major distress and you don't think that they can spend the rest of the day or night alone, like call for the authorities. And it's okay to say that. That's actually recommended to say that this is a mental health crisis, because that will let the first responders know that they don't need to come in like, quote unquote guns blazing, but that this is a mental health issue. So that's really important to include when you're seeking help.
Thank you. Well, and I feel like we're already kind of here, but so what are some resources that you suggest to either for adults to support youth mental health, for, teens to support teens, to teens to support themselves, all of that?
Yeah. So I did see in the comments that somebody put the Trevor Project. That's a really great resource. I also saw 211's already there. And 211 has all kinds of stuff in there that's related not just to mental health, but like if you or someone is struggling like financially, 211 links you up to things like food assistance or paying the utility bills and stuff like that. I know some teens may be working, to help their family pay the bills. And so that might be a place to look for extra assistance there. In terms of programs and things that you can participate in, I would recommend some of our University of Maryland programs, such as the 4-H program. So the 4-H Youth Development Program is open to everybody. We are very serious about the commitment to equal access for all people. And I know that the faculty and the staff that work for 4-H support that that inclusivity factor. So everyone is working to make it a really safe space for all youth, and it's a place where you get to explore your interests and your identity and what makes you you, and it gives you the chance to show off too. There's all kinds of competitions for any adults watching. Maybe you remember participating in competitions with 4-H as a kid yourself. But so that's one thing. And then for any other adults who work with youth, we offer through the University of Maryland Extension mental health first aid for youth. So it is a program for adults who work with youth, but it trains you to see the warning signs of a developing mental health challenge for young people and how to respond. There's practice in communicating, with somebody who's in distress. So that's really helpful too. And then I mentioned this earlier, but I offer a lot of programs related to relationship education, and I know that that can really influence somebody's mental health at any stage, but especially during the teen years. And so if if you're a young person and you're interested in learning more about healthy relationship skills, that's something that you can learn with us, and you don't have to be like a college student to learn from these programs. And so all you have to do is invite us out, and we'll come to your school to talk to whoever. So if there's a youth out there watching right now, and you happen to be, for example, like a member or president or whatever of your school's GSA, like I'd love to come out and do some relationship education specifically for your group in that setting. And we cover all kinds of topics about relationships, from getting together to breaking up and everything in between. So it's people don't necessarily think about it as stress management, but it is, because who else is telling you how to deal with it? I mean, I didn't have that when I was a teenager, and I wish I did. So that's another resource that we have available to everyone, no matter where you are, as long as you're in Maryland.
Well, as we move into the final moments, we still have a couple of things to chat about. But if you have a question for Alex, feel free to type it in the chat or the comments. We have plenty of time to answer and discuss whatever questions you have. While we're talking about resources, I do definitely want to give a couple of plugs for things. One of them being Trans Lifeline. If you are a trans individual that just you need to talk to someone, it can be crisis, it can be not so crisis. Trans Lifeline is there for you, so please utilize that service. Another one that we have is the Teen Line, Teen Line Online. There is a chat service, there is a texting service. It is for teens that have questions. It can be general questions, it can be someone in crisis, it can be someone in need. It's very similar to 211, but it is specific to teens, and it's not just in Maryland, but it is a great resource for you. And the other thing that I'd really like to plug is our own LGBTQ heritage page. And I'm sorry for who is working awesome, great job. Who's working the back end? I'm springing things. if you would like just more information about identity or resources or community organizations, partnerships, whatever you're looking for, we try to put everything that we can find on our heritage pages to make sure that you have the resources available to you, either as an LGBTQ plus individual or as a service provider to LGBTQ plus individuals. But now that I've made our plug, I do have one last question for you. And this is a question that I always like to ask my guests, is if adult you could tell teen you something specific, what would you tell yourself? I also never give my guests a heads up that this question is coming because I feel like it's more authentic that way.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, why didn't you tell me this? Okay, no, but something came to mind, and it would be to slow down and try really hard to just like think through your actions and what's going on, because I think it's so easy, especially when you're young, to just go with the flow and get caught up in the norms, of your day and age, and whether it's about relationship choices or whether it's just about like personal life choices, like just slowing down and giving yourself time to think about things. Because what most people don't understand about teenagers, and maybe but I'm sure teenagers understand about themselves, is that they're just as smart and logical as adults. The hang up comes in the emotion side of things, that you need to give yourself, as a teenager, you need to give yourself a little more time, because like I just said, you are just as smart as an adult. You can make really great choices. It's just that emotions tend to take over real quick. And so by constantly telling yourself, like, do I have to make the choice now? Do I have to make this choice now? Like, you can slow down and give that logical side of yourself time to think through, like, what do I really think about this, this problem that I'm having, or what do I really think about this person that I'm interacting with? Like, do I really want to, invite them into my life or go along and do this thing with them? And, it's so slowing down is just like a generalizable piece of advice that I wish I would have taken. And I think that even relates back to what I was saying about like the whole coming out process. I think nowadays, with like social media being so prevalent, that it's really easy to just think, I'm ready to come out, boom, and you post it online. And I think that's where you want to really slow down and think, like, despite the fact that, there's increasing, acceptance, and that you probably have a lot of people around you that may be supportive, it's still important to think through, and this is where talking to an adult can help. Like, what is my next step? Like, who do I actually trust? Like, do I really want to put this on social media like right away? Do I want to build up my support network first? Because like I said, when coming out during the teen years, it's great that that's a possibility these days, but you are also dealing with a lot of other social factors that just may complicate things. So just slowing down and being willing to talk it out with somebody, or even just talking it through in your own mind, but at a slower pace.
Good advice. Thanks for that. I'm glad I didn't give you a heads up. I feel like it would have been a lot more rehearsed and professional if I would have given you the heads up. If we don't have any questions coming in, and I haven't seen any, I guess this marks the end of our Up and Out. Thank you, Alex, for being here. I know I kind of voluntold you to do it, but I'm very glad that you agreed.
Me too. Glad to be here.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope that you all got something out of this. Please tune in on June 9th, same time, for our next Up and Out program. Guest soon to be announced. If you're ever looking for LGBTQ plus programs or services through the library. Again, our heritage page is a great place to start, but also checking out our events page. You'll get to see everything that's there, as well as all of the upcoming up and out programs. So thanks again to everyone, and thank you, Alex.
All right, thanks a lot.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.